Hello and welcome to the Oregon POLST Program's webinar for January 2020. My name is Anthony Anteville, and I am the Executive Director for the Oregon POLST Program. Today's webinar asks the rather far-reaching question, POLST, what's new in Oregon? And here with us today to answer that question are Drs. Susan Tolle and Abby Dotson. Dr. Tolle is Oregon Health and Science University's Cornelia Hayes Stevens Endowed Chair in Healthcare Ethics and chairs the Oregon POLST Coalition. She founded and has directed the OHSU Center for Ethics in Healthcare since 1989 and was one of the originators of POLST in the early 1990s. Dr. Dotson is the director of the Oregon POLST Registry and the project manager for the Oregon POLST Registry's platform redesign. This webinar will be in a slide presentation only format today without audience participation. We will be recording and we will make that recording available afterwards. If you find that you have any questions for either of our speakers, we suggest that you take notes to later email to us after today's event at the email address that will be provided at the end of the presentation. And now I present to you Dr. Susan Tolle.
Hello and welcome. It's a pleasure to begin sharing some of the exciting things that have happened in Oregon in the past year and some things that will be happening in 2020. As we begin, we'd like to share our philosophy about the Center for Ethics in Healthcare and our longstanding policy about not accepting gifts from healthcare industry sources. We, in the Center for Ethics and all of the programs that are housed with us, including the Oregon POLST Program, have never accepted gifts from healthcare industry sources. This is important because all throughout our history, this has been the case for us, and it is something we are continuing. It has led to the separation with the National POLST Paradigm Office in 2017, when the Paradigm Office moved from the Center for Ethics in Healthcare to be under the Tides Foundation and liberalized their conflict of interest policy. We continue to share the goals of other states and the POLST Paradigm Office of wanting to assure that patient wishes are carefully elicited, accurately recorded, and honored. We share what we learn freely with others, and we welcome others to use our innovations. We only ask for appropriate attribution. The National POLST Office changed the National POLST map a few months ago and turned Oregon white. We have appealed that Oregon is a mature state, that we meet all of the standards for mature status with regard to quality assurance, with regard to dissemination. POLST is used in every long-term care facility, every health system, and every hospice program in our state, and half of those who die have a POLST form in the registry at the time of death. We are as or more mature than California and West Virginia. Now we will shift our attention to some very exciting news with the new POLST program and registry, and shift to Dr. Abby Dotson.
Thank you, Susan. Hi, thanks for joining us today. I just want to start off talking about the Oregon POLST Registry to give you a quick reminder of the purpose of the registry. The Oregon POLST Registry is a secure electronic record of POLST orders. We allow for emergency medical professionals to access POLST orders if the original POLST documents cannot be found, and we are a backup system and do not replace the original POLST forms. We're excited to say that the Oregon POLST Registry is just celebrating our 10-year anniversary. As the Oregon POLST Coalition improves the quality and efficiency of forms over the years, older versions are no longer relevant, and we actually don't see many submissions to the registry of forms these old. So we are going to no longer be accepting outdated medical orders that are offered in 2009 and earlier forms. Another quick update on policy is I just wanted to let everyone know that forms submitted from hospice providers can have first priority to be entered into the registry. We realize that that is more of a pressing situation. And so if they want to contact the Oregon POLST Registry office, we can set up a secure file transport protocol and start to get those forms into the registry faster. We'd like to let you know how we're improving the registry in the upcoming year. The first part is a little internal, but I wanted to let you guys know that we're improving the efficiency and the internal workflow of the registry. What this is going to do is reduce POLST form entry time, so POLST forms will get into the database faster and with better accuracy. The new platform will also feature optical character recognition, as well as fast toggle acceptable form year designs. So it'll be easier for our data entry team to get forms into the registry. We're also developing this platform with flexible architecture to stay compliant with future updates and allow us to continue to grow with technology as technology develops. Something that may be more interesting to the general audience and the healthcare providers is that we are focusing on an increase of interoperability with healthcare providers. First, this is going to feature direct ePOLST entry submission into the registry. So we'll be soon providing a platform where providers can fill out an ePOLST and submit it directly to the registry. It'll directly enter into the registry, and then they can save an electronic copy within their electronic medical record. Coming in the future, we are also hoping to provide access to all registered POLST forms for providers. That is a platform that we're working on that will be released a little bit later, so that any healthcare provider can look up to see if their patient already has a form in the registry, or if they have the most current orders with them, or what the most current form says. And that will really allow the Oregon POLST Registry to be the single source of truth for Oregon POLST forms. We are also working on automated quality reporting that will be available for high volume submitters, and electronic EPCR POLST availability for EMS agencies. The first point I talked about, the interoperability features of direct POLST form creation and submission to the registry for healthcare providers, will be a portal that that providers can use to fill out patient information and submit to the registry. Again, as I mentioned, right now it's just going to be a form submission portal, but eventually we hope to create a bidirectional portal where providers can look into our platform and see what orders are on file for a specific patient. We hope to have the first feature of direct submission available early of this year. We believe that this is going to help reduce human error and keep form versions up to date. The second feature that we're offering is going to be an automated quality reporting that's going to be available with integrated analytics and permissions. This will let healthcare systems have control over their own quality, reporting, and it will help them spot trends and metrics that may need to be addressed. Some of the features that we will roll out will be number of submissions, Section A metrics, which will cover the percent CPR forms submitted versus the percent do not resuscitate forms. We will generate metrics on gender and average registrant age submitted by specific healthcare providers, as well as time from form completion to registry receipt. So when was the form completed versus when did the registry receive the form and were able to enter it into our database. All these options will be available in our portal that we are developing for healthcare providers to view. Finally, our last, and hopefully not least, but our last goal for 2020 is to release an electronic POLST availability platform to EMS agencies here in Oregon. We are working, the entire rebuild of the Oregon POLST Registry is being done by Beyond Lucid Technologies, and we're working closely with them as they are experts in EMS, IT, and EPCR development. So we're really excited about this part of having better availability for EMS personnel in a time of emergency. This will generally just provide a drop-in snippet of code that will allow EPCRs to securely search the POLST database. However, the emergency hotline that is currently up and running for EMS personnel will still be available. If you have any questions about the POLST registry upgrade or anything I talked about today, feel free to contact the email at the end of the talk, and your questions will be directed to me. You can also visit orpolstregistry.org and find our website with our contact details. And now I will turn the speaker back over to Susan.
Thank you, Abby, and I really look forward to the platform rebuild and all that it can bring to advance access across our region. I'd like to begin with some of the exciting things that have happened this year in Oregon, and begin to talk also about the major issues and concerns we will be taking on in 2020. To begin with, in February of 2019, the U.S. Government Accounting Office issued a report about innovations in advanced care planning and featured 4 states with more advanced registry systems: Oregon, California, West Virginia, and Idaho. We were honored to be included in this report. I'd like to start with major changes to the POLST form. Oregon has had 13 versions of the Oregon POLST form beginning in the early 1990s and has had statewide use since 1995. Even so, in January of 2019, we made major revisions of the POLST form, and I'd like to share those and then explain what the responses have been. First, we changed the name of what POLST stands for. Previously known as Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, we now use the term Portable Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. The response to this change has been universally positive. It both describes what the form does as across settings of care, and it is more inclusive of all of those who can sign the form. We have not had a single objection to the change in the name of the form. A next major change was color. From the beginning, POLST pink, Pulsar pink, was the color of the form throughout. We learned that transmission across settings of care, scanning, faxing, that the solid pink color sometimes came through as a dark shade of gray, and orders could not be read. We have had a few patients complain, especially if they previously had a solid bright pink form, that they really liked the bright pink form. But the amount of praise across settings of care and the registry in uploading the form and readability has far outweighed the number of complaints about valuing the solid color pink. As we all move to more electronic versions of the form, solid white forms will be seen with more and more frequently, and photocopies have always been valid. Oregon put the feeding tube section on the original version of the form in the early 90s. We also had an antibiotic section in the early years. We removed the antibiotic section in 2011. And in January of 2019, we removed the feeding tube section. We have had one formal complaint from the owner of a group home who thought all of their residents should have orders regarding feeding tube recorded on the POLST form. And we have had a few healthcare professionals describe starting with the feeding tube section as the easiest way to start the conversation. But overall, the responses to removal of this section of the form in our 1-year experience has been phenomenally positive. Let me give you a few examples. Over 500,000 forms have been submitted to the registry. Over 13,000 calls have been made to the Emergency Communications Center. In all of our 10-year history, the Emergency Communications Center has never provided information in a crisis regarding orders on a POLST form related to feeding tubes. The Oregon chapter of the American College of Emergency Physicians formally endorsed the removal of the feeding tube section in September of this year, feeling that real estate on the form was extremely valuable and that feeding tube orders were not useful in a medical crisis, and that there was time for conversation, informed consent, and planning in other contexts. The Oregon Geriatrics Society endorsed the removal of the feeding tube section, and that was approved at a meeting in November. Their endorsement relates not only to the fact that feeding tubes are not a medical emergency, but that actively putting them on the form, particularly for patients with advanced dementia, causes anxiety and distress and confusion for family members when the American Geriatrics Society and other organizations have taken a formal stand that feeding tubes are not appropriate for long-term use in patients with advanced dementia, and that they increase the rate of bed sores without extending life. We have also explored the response of primary care providers. Primary care providers sign the majority of POLST forms submitted to the Oregon POLST Registry. A number of primary care providers have expressed substantial gratitude at the removal of the feeding tube section of the POLST form. For example, when they are seeing a patient shortly after a hospitalization as a first return to the outpatient clinic, adjusting medication, for example, after treatment of heart failure or COPD, and asking the patient if they wish to go back to the ICU, wish to be intubated, wish resuscitation, in a visit that already has a lot to address, such as medication adjustments after a hospitalization. Great pleasure has been expressed that the feeding tube issue, which they did not feel was relevant to a conversation at this particular juncture, was no longer on the POLST form. Oregon has carefully reviewed the uniform proposed document by the POLST Paradigm Office and does not endorse the current version of the uniform document. We certainly agree that having documents that look similar may enhance crossing state lines. In Oregon, having forms from our neighboring states, Washington, Idaho, California, has not been a problem, and we have not identified a single case where forms from our neighboring states were not honored. The Oregon POLST Coalition reaffirmed our commitment to physician assistants being able to sign POLST orders without the counter-signature of their supervising physician. The proposed uniform document has a final line that is signed by the supervising physician. There is no time in Oregon where that would be a relevant line. The supervising physician counter-signature is not needed, and the signature of the authorizing physician in the final line on the form has been useful in guiding where signatures should be found and provided. An update on the role of physician assistants in signing POLST forms is that physician assistants are taking a growing role in the care of patients with serious illness and those in hospice. Oregon has authorized physician assistant signers of POLST forms without the counter signature of their supervising physician since 2007. Recently, CMS has approved physician assistants to serve as the hospice attending. That's in 2019, and in 2020 to be able to provide medication orders to patients in hospice. Another area of the form where we retain the desire to keep the Oregon form as it is relates to a change we made a couple of years ago in who is present for the discussion. We previously wrote the final line if someone didn't have a written formal appointment as the word other. We found that was sometimes hurtful to a loving family member who was not formally appointed, and are retaining the use of relative or friend in that description. Since the very first of our 13 versions of POLST in the early 90s, Oregon has never required a surrogate signature. We have a place where a surrogate could sign, and we encourage that patients sign if they are capable. But some surrogates find this emotionally very burdensome. They feel as if they personally are pulling the plug. And for some people, this burden outweighs the benefits of having their signature on the form. They are simply letting us know what their loved one wanted, but these are not their orders. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the 2019 form in Oregon has been its rapid adoption. The form became available on the 1st of January. By the 2nd of January, all of those on the VINCA ePOLST system were automatically converted to the new form version for completion of POLST forms online. By July, the majority of POLST forms being submitted to the Oregon POLST Registry were the 2019 version. By November, 82% of the forms being submitted were the 2019 version. We have never had such a rapid transformation to conversion of a new form and dissemination of change and improvements in the quality of the POLST program. The Oregon POLST Program Office distributed 153,000 printed versions of the Oregon POLST Form in 2019. This is in addition to people who are completing POLST by the ePOLST system and those who are self-printing and using printed forms. A remarkable transformation statewide, and we thank all of our partners, all of those who serve on the Quality Committee, on the Education Committee, on the Technology Committee, and on our Community Insight Committees for helping us distribute this information so rapidly and so effectively statewide. Concurrently, we have updated educational materials to match the new form and to match other things we have learned in the meantime. For example, we have updated the Understanding POLST video to match the 2019 form. We have updated the Oregon POLST Guidebook to have contents reflecting the educational innovations that match the new form and other things that we have learned through the Quality Assurance Program. We have expanded the number of patient stories in our educational portfolio for patients and families on our website and plan to continue to do so in 2020. One of the areas we've been concerned about is the fact that POLST is only as good as the quality of the conversation that took place. And while our Quality Committee and the POLST Registry can examine many aspects of the POLST form and improve quality, we do not have a way through the registry to judge the quality of the conversations. We have made that a major focus in the last 2 years. We, for the past 2 years and later this month, for the third year, we will test graduating medical students on their communication skills in giving bad news. This is a graduation requirement at OHSU, and we tutor those who are struggling. We have long used Respecting Choices, a number of other educational interventions, such as the toolkit for the communications project. We are also launching a Vital Talk initiative because to set up a POLST conversation means you gave bad news with skill to be able to then move forward with a conversation about goals of care. We are partnering with Tony Bach and others under the leadership of Dr. Katie Stowers and training residency and fellow faculty who direct those programs to become Vital Talk instructors and enhance the level of education of our trainees. We are building our endowment base to be able to spread our communication efforts more extensively. And Katie Stowers is the Ronald W. Nadeau Director in Serious Illness Education. And we have just posted another communications position as a funded Doris and Mark Storms Chair in Compassionate Communication as we expand our initiative in assuring high-quality conversations. Let's talk about some things that are new in 2020. There are some new policies in Oregon and some new statutory changes that we'd like to call to everyone's attention. We congratulate the Oregon Hospice Association, Barb Hansen and colleagues, on the passage of Senate Bill 178. It broadens who can sign to enroll patients in hospice and serve as a surrogate in signing the hospice enrollment paperwork, so that everyone who is nearing the end of life qualifies for hospice but may no longer be capable of signing paperwork to enroll can receive high-quality end-of-life care in Oregon. We also call your attention to Senate Bill 1039. It talks about persons with developmental disabilities and assures a new role called a healthcare advocate. That is someone who can sign so that care can be given for someone who doesn't have a guardian or otherwise legally authorized representative. And so with that, the advocate also has an obligation to meet with the healthcare team and provide information about the patient's wishes, values, what provides the patient comfort, to assist the healthcare team in decision-making about life-sustaining treatment. This would include decisions about a POLST form. The healthcare advocate would not sign and is not authorized to sign as the surrogate, but they are obligated to provide important information and better informed decision-making. We are grateful to our colleagues at the Oregon Health Authority who are leaders in caring for persons with significant disabilities and senior and protective services. They helped guide the revision of a new document issued in November that talks about guidelines on POLST use in persons with significant disabilities who are now nearing the end of life. One of the challenges with people with significant disabilities is that sometimes POLST forms or other limitations of life-sustaining treatment can be made on the basis of long-standing bias and prematurely planning limitations of life-sustaining treatment for persons with decades to live. On the other hand, persons with significant disabilities will eventually die. And as they are nearing the end of their life, sometimes that was not being recognized, and appropriate high-quality end-of-life care was not being honored. This new document addresses both sides of that equation with the goal of assuring high-quality care to everyone in Oregon, including those with significant disabilities, receiving high-quality care. Our work is not done. We have been gathering a great deal of data over the last couple of years with a very active quality assurance committee. We have also conducted several research projects and published data this past year. And we are focusing on two major areas where substantial improvement can and needs to be made. We are concerned about the overuse of POLST in those who are too healthy. We are using data from the Oregon POLST Registry to look at age, for example, any marked increase at age 65 or other 66, 67 annual to wellness visits, annual Medicare wellness visits, and looking at why quite so many people who appear healthy are having POLST forms. We published an article about feeding tubes in January of last year in JAGS. In that article is this data, but it's not presented in bar graph format that catches the attention the way we are sharing it on this slide. Dr. Terry Schmidt and a research team looked at submissions to the Oregon POLST Registry in 2012. And I and several colleagues looked at submissions in 2017 using the same criteria for order combinations. And what we found was that the most common order combination in 2012 was do not resuscitate and comfort measures only at 34.4%. Full code, full treatment orders that same year, 2012, represented 23.6%. 5 years later, the ratio had flipped, and orders for comfort measures only now lagged behind those for full code, full treatment, which is the most common order combination submitted in 2017. Since people receive full code, full treatment without a POLST form, we are concerned about could there be any harms in completing a POLST form earlier for those who instead should have an advance directive. We are concerned that there could be harms, that it may dissuade people from having a more in-depth conversation as a person's health declines, that as someone is enrolled in hospice, if a POLST form is not updated, what will be in the registry, which increasingly is becoming our source of all truth in the state about POLST, that order set could be followed and not updated in as timely a way. Some patients are only enrolled in hospice for 3 days before they die. Getting them up and running with a new POLST form in the registry might not occur fast enough before a crisis occurred. Part of the reason associated with an increase in full code, full treatment POLST orders, we have not done a randomized control trial, is that we are finding an association between any kind of counting of POLST forms as an advanced care planning measure and more POLST forms being completed for full code, full treatment. We have written a policy actually in 2018, and it's on our policy page, that advises all health systems and all coordinated care organizations to not count POLST forms as an advanced care planning measure. Not just do not have a financial incentive, but do not count POLST forms. Count conversations, you can count advance directive forms, but do not count POLST forms. We will continue working on this policy issue throughout 2020. The second major focus area for change for our quality work in 2020 is to advance policy change related to persons with POLST forms who set limits, particularly those with orders for comfort measures only, who come into the emergency department. We are well aware that many patients with POLST forms for comfort measures only call hospice instead of emergency medical services, 911, and that many patients in long-term care facilities with limits on POLST, indicating they do not wish to be transferred, are not transferred and cared for in their current setting of care. But those who are transferred, perhaps their comfort cannot be managed where they are, those individuals have POLST forms that are sometimes missed in the emergency department and not discovered until they are already intubated in the intensive care unit. Increasingly, systems in Oregon are putting POLST form on the patient header, as described in this generic example, with an ePOLST tab with one click, something that has been endorsed many years ago, to instantly find in a single click the POLST form. And for those who are bi-directional and connected with the registry currently on the VINCA ePOLST system, you can see forms from every health system, and the most recent form is instantly available. The key is, can we be sure it is always checked in the emergency department? Kelly Varnes and colleagues published data last year, in the Annals of Emergency Medicine, suggesting substantial room for improvement. This is non-trauma patients coming into the OHSU emergency department in 2015 and 16. Just under 7% had a POLST form. We can see the impact of the rising rate of full code, full treatment orders. Just over half had that order combination. But there were a significant number of patients that had limited POLST orders. There was an association between having limited or comfort measures only orders and a reduced rate of ICU admissions. So there was some impact, but there were people whose orders were not checked in the emergency department. We can tell exactly when you click and look at the record. Or no notations were made, nor was the POLST registry emergency communication center contacted. Now, certainly some of these patients may have had a form come in with them. It may not have been charted in the record. But our overall belief is that there is room for improvement, and we were only able to document 22 of the 255 patients with orders for comfort measures only being viewed in the emergency department prior to admission. We think that is an underestimate, but we are quite certain that some patients are missed. It's a little bit like a needle in the haystack because this population represents only 1% of all emergency department visits. A year ago, we set up a protocol at OHSU for trauma patients. We are a level 1 trauma center. There are 2 level 1 trauma centers in the state. And for patients initially 85 and older and subsequently changed to 80 and older, social workers are assigned to every trauma patient, and the emergency department social workers query the Oregon POLST Registry and alert the trauma chief to those who have POLST forms with limitations. Some of these patients, in meetings with patients and families in a more timely way, have bypassed our intensive care units. The trauma numbers are smaller than the number of 85-year-olds coming into our emergency department. 16 patients a month. The capture rate, because we have a pop-up in the social work note about these patients, is 95%, and over half of them have POLST forms in the registry. We hope to implement similar systems around the state, and a formal approval by the Oregon College of Emergency Physicians has sent out a policy to all emergency departments recommending that each emergency department establish a protocol to routinely check for POLST portable orders for life-sustaining treatment on anyone 85 or older or coming into the emergency department from a residential care facility. We recognize that critical access hospitals have different staffing levels and that a uniform protocol for how emergency departments would do this does depend on staffing and personnel's and flow and size, and that a uniform policy could not be created. That is a rapid tour of 2019 and Oregon POLST and a look to the future. We welcome any questions you may have, and I will turn the microphone over to Anthony Anteville to close our webinar.
I want to thank Susan and Abby and everyone who has joined us. If you have questions or want to learn more about the Oregon POLST program, please visit and bookmark oregonpolst.org. Anyone who registered for today's event will continue to receive updates about Oregon POLST via our e-newsletter. We will send out a link for this recorded presentation to everyone who registered for this event. Look for an email with this link by the end of this week. We want to thank you again for joining us, and this concludes today's event.